Hello everyone. New Year's Eve is just a couple of days away, so I thought I would paint our New Year 2024 filled with flowers for you. Now if you've never painted letters or the alphabet filled with any kind of pattern, then there are a couple of tips I can share with you today that might make it a little easier. If you're new here, my name is Teresa. I'm a surface pattern designer and watercolor artist. This is what we're painting today. Now you can use any font you want, but there are a few things to think about in making your selection. So let's just get started and we'll talk about that along the way. I took my iPad and traced off my numbers onto a piece of paper. There are several different ways to do this, but the iPad works really well for a light board. So I just traced off my numbers, and as you see I did it in reverse and then taped it down to my paper, and then I'm just tracing back over it again. So you want your lead, the first tracing, to be next to the paper, because when I'm tracing over now, it will transfer that, as you can see here. I'm sure y'all probably know how to do that. Decide beforehand what elements you want to paint. I'm going to do roses and some lavender and then just some greenery. And I will put the colors list down in the description below with my paintbrushes and all of that. So you want to think about what elements you're going to place where. So I just kind of want some random floral. I'm not overthinking it too much, but so I've put 2 pink roses. I will have 2 yellow roses. The big trick here is you really want your elements right next to that line, because that's what's going to define your shape. And so when I first did this years ago, I left too much white space. And I think we all have a tendency to do that. You leave too much white space, and then your number or your letter really gets lost. So the more elements you can put along the edge, the better. And as you see, I will put some vines right next to that edge, you know, and we'll erase the pencil marks. I just take some of my more prominent elements and place them first, and then I come back and start filling in with greenery. And so I don't want all my elements to be the perspective of looking straight at them. I want some of them to look like they're really going around that number. So I'm only going to paint partial blooms and partial leaves as I'm doing here. And that just gives it more of a rounded 3D effect. And it also puts more pigment right there on that outside edge so that you can define that number really well. So my number 2 and 0 did really well, but the number 4 in this font did not do well. I think it's too rounded, it's too bubbly, and it lost a lot of its shape. That little space in the 4, that's that center hole, that's too small. It really needed to be larger. So I would not use this font again if I were going to use the number 4. But there are tons of fonts out there. Just be sure to pick one where the numbers are very clear and distinct and not too stylized that can cause you these kinds of problems. And of course, if you're not hand lettering this yourself, if you are using a font that you've picked up somewhere, then, you know, be careful about that. Make sure that you're using it within your rights, you know, depending on whether you're using it for commercial or for personal use. You know, always be sure you look at that information and make sure that you're okay. It's an easy thing to misstep on. The number 0 here, I really like the way this one turned out. This was an easy one to fill, and that center hole is really large, so it really helped. And sometimes I'll place my, my main elements and then come back and I may go back to that first two here in a minute and find a little hole that I want to fill. And I love this technique because all you need is a little color. It doesn't really have to look exactly like a leaf. It's very forgiving, especially this small. You can just put a little bit of color in there and fill that spot, and it's fine. And I sped this up very quickly because once you see it, it can get pretty long and tedious. I actually spent about 40 minutes painting this. In this sped up version, I think you can see really well what I'm doing. Now the problem that the number 4 had for me at the end, I just wasn't happy with, it just looked like, a bit of a blob. And so I went back, and as you're going to see here in a moment, I actually outline all of these numbers in a solid green. And I did not want to do that because I really love the way it's looking right now, but that 4 just kind of ruined it for me. So I had to add some solid pigment, and that fixed the problem. I think that worked just fine. It still looks good. It's just not the way I had planned it. I thought about outlining these with glitter or gold paint, but personally, I don't like dealing with glitter. It just gets everywhere, and it's hard to control, and it's hard to clean up. So although I do like the way it looks after it's finished, I don't like dealing with it. So I'd rather go with the gold Sminkies paint that I've been using throughout the holidays. I love that. I need to get a silver, I think, in it. But I did not want to use the gold here on this. I didn't think that was going to help that 4 stand out too much. So I went with the solid watercolor instead. It also helps to add elements of a different size. Don't have everything the same. The roses are the same size. I probably should have thrown in maybe a few rose buds to make them smaller. That would have been a good idea, I think. The purple flower here is a little bit larger. It's a different shape. Instead of being like a round rose, it's more of a cone. So that really helps. And then I'm trying to get some leaves that are some larger, some smaller, and that really helps with the cohesiveness. Filling in a number or a letter is great practice. If you are searching for inspiration or searching for an idea of something to paint, this is a really good one because it exercises your brain and your hand control. Because you have to think about where things are going to go. You're working in a confined space. And so you have to control your elements, and it's like a puzzle. You're working through a puzzle. And I just think that's a wonderful exercise when you don't know what to paint. And you certainly don't have to paint flowers. You could paint anything. You could paint all leaves or polka dots even. It really doesn't matter. It's just getting your brain to exercise a little bit. And that will free up some of your painter's block sometimes just by the act of doing something. This is a good exercise for that, I think. Okay, there it is with the solid outline. I think that really helped. Well, I hope you enjoyed that one. If you did, please give me a thumbs up to let me know. And if you haven't subscribed yet, please consider subscribing. I have a lot more really fun watercolor videos coming up real soon. And I hope you all have a wonderful New Year's Eve. Thanks so much, and hope to see you next week.